What's up, guys? Today's the first 2 Minute Tuesday. I'm planning to have this recorded, edited, and up in the same day. I know it's really late. I got a late start. I had a lot of news today. So let's get into it. All right, in today's episode, we're going to talk about specifically the different types of line. I've gotten a couple questions here and there, especially doing my tutorial, as to why to use different lines. All right, as you can see up here, that way. As you can see up there, we have starting off with nylon monofilament. This is regular monofilament. It's what everybody uses pretty much when you first start fishing, regardless of where you go. This is a good all-purpose line. In the game, this is the first one that you have access to. You don't need any special levels or anything like that. They give you monofilament. It's a good all-around basic line. Let's take a look at a couple things with it. Now, the main things from this screen is you have your length, your diameter range, and your load capacity. Now, that means that you have about 90% of the information you need right there in front of you as to know which lines are going to work for what you're trying to do. Some things you can use really, really cheap line. Other things you need really expensive line. Even with mono, there's different scales with it. It's different sizes, and there's a reason for each one. So, as you can see, we go from cheapest to most expensive. You got start with 100, somewhere around 100 meters. Some of them are 120, 110 meters, up to about 300, 350 meters. And on down until you get to 1,000 meters. Now, with 1,000 meters, there's very, very, very few things that are going to use 1,000 meters of mono. Mono is real thick, not really real thick, but it is thicker line. Most reels are not going to take that much mono, especially a bigger mono. So I highly doubt you'll ever use that, but it's there if you want to. I didn't get individual monos mainly because they're so universal. Now, if you look at each one of these, you have your length. It's going to tell you if it's going to be long enough. If you're using telesticks for a lot of fish, you don't really need 300 meters because you're only using 7 to 8 meters. If you're using new equipment like spark reels and lacertes and things like that, depends on what you're fishing for, you probably don't need that long a line. Mono is perfectly fine. You can catch trophies on it. You can catch large fish on it. The only real problem is when you start getting into the very large fish, into, let's say, from carp and bigger, and you don't have a big enough reel to actually stop it. You can buy mono that can hold the strength, but you may not have a reel that can actually stop it. So in those cases, what you're going to do is you're going to upgrade to a different type of line. We'll talk about that in a minute. Basically, all you need to know about mono is buy what you can afford. The higher quality, in essence, the most expensive, is going to be better. It's going to be more invisible in the water. You can pick colors to kind of reflect where you're fishing. It all helps, but it's not really necessary 100% if you want to use whichever one you want. Next, we're going to cover fluorocarbon line. And the reason we're going to go to fluorocarbon line is because it is the most common for leaders and telesticks. Why those two specifically? Because in these two scenarios, when you're float fishing, sometimes you can't use a leader. Therefore, you need to have it as short as possible. Also, with fluoro, it's almost invisible in the water. The fish that are predatory use their eyes for hunting, they're not going to see this in the water. That goes for almost all predatory fish, whether it be perch, pike, Atlantic salmon, asp, zander. All these will use sight to hunt. So anytime you're going to be fishing for something that is using its sight to actually get their bait. So one of the common bottom feeders is brim. Brim utilize their vision, therefore you need a fluorocarbon leader. You don't need it, but it does help. A lot of people use mono, just straight mono all the way across. With fluorocarbon, usually you can increase your bite rate and size of fish that you actually get to bite. There's a few different fluorocarbons. As you can tell, the main things you look at are length, diameter, and load capacity. Now, even though it's nearly invisible, the bigger the line, the easier it is for a fish to detect. It's going to be the same with everything. That's just how the game operates. Things like this where it says 25 meters or 30 meters here or 30 meters here, these are going to be used mainly for making leaders and using on telesticks. Now, these telesticks, when you're using them, you probably are not going to use a leader. If you're going to use a leader, you would just use mono and then have a fluorocarbon leader. There's no reason to have your whole line be fluorocarbon. If you are going to use a fluorocarbon full line for things like bleak, where you need to be real close to the surface, usually it's great. If you're going to use it for other small fish that might be near the surface, or maybe they're not near the surface, but you're still using a telestick. It's not like it's going to, you're not going to need a whole lot of line on a reel, because this is the thickest line you can buy. This isn't the kind of thing you normally put on a rod and reel. They do sell it in 300 meter sets. I have never used it like that. I'm not saying nobody has, but it's not something that's very common. Most people don't recommend it. Again, fluorocarbon primarily for leaders and for telesticks. Keep that in mind. You're going to catch a lot of fish. All right, on to the one that makes the most difference as to what you're doing. The same parameters count. The length, the diameter, and the load capacity. Now, what makes braid different is braid is very visible. You cannot hide braid through the water. So you're not going to want to use it when you're spin fishing or when you're fishing for fish that actually use their eyes to find the bait. Braid is used so that you can put more line on a reel. Therefore, when you go for these bigger fish, or even some of the smaller fish, if you want to use smaller reels, but you want to use long lines so that you can fight the fish further out and have it run further, braid is what you use so that you can make sure the fish does not get away before it's tired and you can reel it in. The higher the quality, the thinner the line. So these are going to be really thick compared to the same strength of one of these. The devil braid is some of the thinnest you can buy, with exception to the micro braid, which is here. Now, when we're talking about micro braid, again, this is for very small things. As you can see, the biggest load capacity that this comes in is 7.3, and it only comes in 100 meters. If you're using this, more than likely you're using it as a braided leader. Braided leaders are for a very specific thing, which is bottom feeders. That's things like sturgeon and carp, primarily. Now, there's other things like burbot and a few other bottom feeders that you can use this as a leader, and that's primarily what some of these smaller amount, like the 100 meters are. Now, you can put these 100 meters on your reel at the early stages. If you have like a spark, early on the belaya or whatever, you can use a spark. You can get 110 meters of this cheap braid that's more than capable of handling the load, and then put a fluorocarbon leader. Therefore, you get the best of both worlds. You get the strength and the small size of the braid with the invisibility of that fluorocarbon leader. Now, how do we go from there? The higher you go, obviously the thinner, so that you can put more and more. I can tell you without a doubt, I know this because I use it, a Lacerti 2, the one that comes in the starter feeder kit, you can fit this entire line of somewhere around 8 kilos on that reel, which is more than strong enough to almost to get to level 29 on the reel, which puts the maximum amount of resistance on the fish without locking the reel. It gives you plenty of headway, and 350 meters is a great lower level, maybe not low level, but it's a lower level line You can fish for bigger fish and let them run. You just fight them over time. Things like Old Berg, where you have a chance for getting grass carp when you're brim fishing. Obviously, you're not necessarily expecting to catch a 26-kilo grass carp when you're brim fishing, but if you have this 350 meters of braided line, every now and then you might get one to bite, and you have a chance at that point where you can run around, you can chase it, and there's nowhere it can get away from you. Let's look at just one small difference in these three. We saw braided line, fluorocarbon, and mono. There's one other difference between the three. So we already established that fluorocarbon is invisible, mono's kind of in the middle, and braided is the most visible. The other difference is mono will stretch, fluorocarbon and braided line will not. If you have braided line with a fluorocarbon leader, your setting the hook will be more intense than if you had mono. That's one of the reasons with telesticks, sometimes you do use mono so that, especially for the smaller fish, you can get a little bit lighter hit when you start setting the hook. In the game, I don't know if that's part of the game, but I have had a whole lot more luck with smaller fish using mono or mono with a fluorocarbon leader. That way you have the maximum stretch while still maintaining that invisibility. Braid is what you're going to use late game for sure. This would be like the strongest lines you can buy. This is the Snake Heavy Braid. As you can see, it's 1,000 meters. There's 190 kilograms in this version. Now, I don't know of any reel that's even usable. I don't know why you would want to use it. And you can tell that it's 0.78 millimeters thick. So you're not going to use there's not a reel out there that you can put 0.78 millimeters thick line and get 1,000 meters on the reel. But the reason that this exists is so that you can, if you do break off, you have another one. Now, how are you going to break off 190 kilograms? I don't know. I've never seen it. Yes, there's fish that are over 190 kilograms in the game. Those belugas are absolute messes, and you're not going to stop them. Even if you lock the reel with the strongest Venga, or you lock the reel with the strongest heavy mech, you're not going to stop that fish. All right, guys, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I know this is over 2 minutes. I'm going to go edit it now. Hope you have a good one. Hit the thumbs up if you liked it. If you'd like to see more of these, hit the subscribe, hit the thumbs up, leave a comment saying, hey, I really like this. I want to see more things covering all the other gear. Make sure that you hit the subscribe, turn on the notifications so you can see more of these. I hope to see you soon. Thank you. Have a great one.